Joshua chapter 3. Follow that arc is the lesson here. This goes through Joshua's 3 and 4 and a little bit of 5. As we see God leading Israel, excuse me, to the Jordan River, and of course then parting the water for them to cross over, however you want to consider it. And then Israel setting up a memorial to instruct future further generations about God's power. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Chapter 3 is Israel setting out after God. Chapter 4 is Israel setting up a memorial to God. And then chapter 5, a little bit chapter 5 is Israel submitting to God. So we'll see first of all here Israel setting out after God in chapter 3. And for the most part, that's probably what we'll get through today as we kind of move through this. All right, in jobs, occupations, work that you have done, in jobs that you have held, any job, doesn't matter what it is, what was more important in your job? All right, was the job description or the list of duties or the designation of the person in charge? What, in jobs that you have held, what was more important? Job descriptions, list of duties, or who the boss was? The duties, okay. Duties. Okay. Anybody have another? I think most important part of the job is who's in charge. Okay? Because that kind of everything derelicts from there. So let me ask you this. How might your performance at the job be different if your job description said you're reporting to yourself? How might your performance at said job be different if in the description it said you are reporting to yourself?
You might just like off.
Now, Jane.
Okay.
God made it pretty clear here that the Israelites ultimately reported to Him. And miraculously led into the promised land at this point, so that they would, for generations to come, understand and come to realize that they existed for God's purpose. Okay? And there was no other way around that. What are some examples of things that you would never do while on the job, in case you found out to be lazy or insubordinate? What are things you would never do while on the job? What are some things you wouldn't do? Sleep. There we go, right? Take a nap. Get you in trouble quickly, wouldn't it? What else? Huh?
I was a nurse.
Yeah.
Couldn't act like a patient.
Not that, okay. Don't back talk a patient, sure. Leave. Smacking a child when they need it, right? Something that I can't do. They may need it, right? Those are things you can't do. Smacking a parent of that child sometimes too, right? Those are all things that you can't do. Who or what motivates you to work hard while on the job? Self. I'm pretty self-motivated. As long as I know what the expectations are, or even just at least a broad range of what they are. I can usually I can motivate myself to get stuff done. Some people aren't that way. Some people need motivation. Some of that's a little bit personality traits. But what are some other things, maybe not just self, what are some other things that motivate you to work hard in a job? Appreciation. Now, I know this isn't the case anymore. I drive a bus across Sandy Ridge, so I have gotten to know some coal truck drivers fairly well on the radio. And I don't know that they used to be, from what I can tell, they used to get paid by the load, right? And I think a lot of them now are more hourly, okay? But when they got paid by the load, what was the motivation? Boom, boom, right as fast as they can because they're trying to get as many loads, and rightfully so. I would have been the same way. I'm getting paid by the load. I'm trying to haul as much as I can in a lot of time. So, reward, money, sometimes can motivate you to work hard. And there's nothing wrong with being paid a wage for your job and working hard at that job and being rewarded because of that, right? God makes it clear here to the Israelites, again, ultimately, He was the boss. Based on how He got them into the promised land, they were to find His leadership highly motivating. Because if they just listened and did what they were supposed to and worked hard, what was going to be the reward? Pretty good wages, right? Of the promised land. Kind of the same idea here. Okay, first 4 verses here of chapter 3, we see Israel setting out after God. And God gives them some pretty specific instructions on crossing the Jordan River. All right, they're up on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Jordan River's pretty big. It's going to be hard to have enough boats to take millions of people right across the Jordan River to ford it or paddle across it or whatever the case may be. So they're going to figure out how to get all these people across and do it in at least a pretty timely fashion. So as we see here in the first 4 verses, Joshua and the Israelites went from the area of Shittim to the banks of the Jordan River, and the Acacia Grove is kind of the area that they moved into. Let's read the first 4 verses here and we'll get into this. Joshua rose early in the morning and they removed from Shittim and came to Jordan, he and all of the children of Israel, and they lodged there before they passed over. Verse 2, and it came to pass that after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, when ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests of the Levites bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go. For ye have not passed this way heretofore. All right, so Joshua's led the children here at this point of Israel to a change in location. Leaving early in the morning, 10 miles or so. That's about how far they were traveling. It took about a 10-mile trip. So most likely they walked for a large portion of the day. In the grand scheme of things, of traveling 10 miles in a day, that's very doable. That's walkable, right? Tired, sure, when you're done, but that's walkable. That's how far they were traveling. So most likely walked for a large portion of the day. And it was an important move here because it brought Israel to the edge of the promised land. Okay, that's why that's here. They're there. And then it brought them to the barrier that was at that edge, the Jordan River, which was hindering them from getting into the promised land. So in reality, this was as far as Joshua could lead God's people. There wasn't anything Joshua could do to get all these people across Jordan River. Okay, so he brought them as far as he could. Now they needed direct intervention, right? They could follow Joshua, but now they needed direct intervention from God to get them across the Jordan River, all right? Joshua could not overcome the Jordan River as it was, but it was also, now we know, is flooded, right? It's a flood stage. And a troubling barrier for anybody to go through, especially all these people, right? So the last time the Israelites had faced a troubling barrier was where? When was the last time the Israelites had faced a troubling barrier of water? The Red Sea, right? That was the last time. As soon as God had led them out of Egypt, that's over in Exodus chapter 14. And at that time, they needed to get away, of course, from Pharaoh and get away from the army that is after them as well. And God demonstrated at that point that Israelites, of course, could trust him because Moses, through God's power, parted the Red Sea. In the process of them parting the Red Sea, also destroyed the Egyptian army, which, if you look back at history, probably the beginning of the decline of the great civilization of the Egyptians at this point. Most history books won't tell you that. That's probably the army got wiped out. And an army ain't no power, right? So this is usually probably the beginning of the fall here. The city or the state or the nation of the Egyptians. That's a side point, sorry. The flooded Jordan River, though, was different than the Red Sea. All right, this was a different scenario. It also, yes, keeping Israel from getting to their destination, but they're not fleeing an army trying to get away. Now they're trying to get across so they can do what? Start conquering, right? They're ready to start a war with these people. So God is about to use the Jordan River here as a way to demonstrate once again that he is in fact the person or the being, he is the trusted leader that they should trust for this task that was at hand. What difference do you think is the mood of the Israelites in comparison to the Red Sea, to the Jordan River? What's the vibe like? What's the mood there for the Israelites in comparison to the Red Sea and Jordan River?
Instead of fear.
Pardon?
Excitement
instead of fear. And if we remember from the Red Sea, like they get up to there and they know the armies are coming, and what are the Israelites doing? They're hollering at Moses and like they're complaining, right? Why are you brought here to die? Right? They all the things they were saying to him, and complaining and fear and screaming out all these things. Desperation, right, was a thing for them as well. Immediate threat. But now the Jordan River, obviously, tons of excitement, getting ready to go and take the Promised Land they have heard about for so many years, and the anticipation, of course, that God is giving them. So, in order for the people to be prepared to follow the Lord, Joshua sends God's instructions through the typical chain of command we've seen him use, right? He has governors or leaders or people in charge in verse 2. And it came to pass that after 3 days, so they were there for 3 days, the officers went through the host and told them the instructions. And we see the instructions in verse 3. And they commanded the people, saying, when ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests and the Levites bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. So, what were the people supposed to follow? The ark. Okay. Very clear, very specific, pretty easy to follow instructions. Everybody, all the Israelites know what the Ark of the Covenant looked like? Absolutely. Right? They knew exactly the care that was taken with the Ark of the Covenant as well, as they've been moving around the wilderness for 40 years. Right? So that they understood. So that was the instructions. The fact here that the priests were carrying the ark was actually de-emphasizes here Joshua's instructions, right? The priests carrying the ark were like a secondary role of guiding the people into the Promised Land, because they were simply just following God's step-by-step instructions on where to take the ark and when. The priests know where to take the ark. Right, God told them to do that, right? That's the whole point of this. So the people also, the priests understood, the people also understood here that the ark was a symbol of God's presence in Israel. That was there. That's why that was there. Where does God dwell at in the ark? On the mercy seat, right? And that is between the cherubims, right, that were there, which is on top of the ark, right? That's where it was at. So that was God's representation for his presence with them, and they knew, and essentially like following the ark was the same thing as following God. Okay, so that's why these instructions are being used. Why were the people there? Verse 4, right? Yet there shall be what? Some space. Why were the people not allowed or not supposed to go near the ark? They weren't supposed to touch it. They touch it, what happens to them? They die. A little history on this here. Why else were they not supposed to go near the ark?
The holiness of the representation of it.
Say it again.
Because of the holiness of the representation.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Can't put themselves close to the holiness of it. I got one more reason though. Why were they not supposed to go near it?
See where it went.
Right. So they can see where it was going. Right? They didn't know where to go. These people had no idea. They're just sheep following along. Right? One foot in front of the other. They had no idea, but the ark did know. So if it's off far enough and away from it, everybody can see where it goes, and there's no confusion. Nobody's looking like, where's it going? No, left or right. It's not happening here, right? Because there's lots of people that are moving. So this needs to be off in the distance away so that the collective can see where it's going. And these people don't know where it's going. Only the priests and Levites know because God's instructing them. So it's important. Yes, they can't touch it or they die. Reason enough to stay 2,000 cubic feet away from it, right? The holiness of the fact that the mercy of God's presence, reason enough to stay away from it. But also they need to see where to go, right? It just makes it easier to kind of see where how things are. God wanted the people to stay behind the ark about 1,000 yards. That's how far this is. Okay, 1,000 yards is about what this is. And the people were not to overtake the ark. They were not to crowd up to the ark. God wanted it to be clear. 1,000 yards is a long ways. Right? 1,000 football fields. It's a long ways. God wanted it to be very clear, absolutely clear, that He was leading the people into the promised land. Okay, that's why you see this space that is there. There's also a sense here, like Ms. Jennifer said, that it's the ark is holy. And because of the holiness of God's presence that is with it, the people are to respect God's presence in His holiness. Staying back showed that though God was with them and that they were not equal, God was in charge. All right, that's why this is here. Okay, so that's the directions for crossing. Verses 5 and 6, we see a dedication that takes place before their crossing. Now, the Canaanites, the heathenites, that's what we like to call them, the heathenites here, worshipped false gods. And that in their minds, those false gods existed to help them fulfill the desires of their flesh. So consequently, they're using these gods to try to accomplish selfish purposes. Sought to appease them with sacrifices, rituals, so on and so forth. We know all the things they were doing to try to satisfy these false gods. They were doing that in order to get what they wanted. Israel's relationship, though, is different. We know that because Israel's relationship is, of course, with the one true God. So Israel was existing to serve God's purpose. But God did not exist to bow to any selfish or sinful desires that Israel might have. So, with that understanding in mind, the people existed for God, not the other way around. Right? Joshua told the people to sanctify themselves. Go to verse 5. And Joshua said unto the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua spake unto the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant, and pass over before the people. And they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. So Joshua tells them to sanctify themselves there in verse number 5. Israel's sanctification. Okay, this is a process that happened. And within Israel's sanctification, it oftentimes this process included washing of one's clothes, washing of one's body, all these things is a symbol of separation of God. Okay, or separation to God, excuse me. Don't have time to turn there, but specifically Exodus 19, we kind of see this methodology put into place. Okay, so they're cleaning themselves, bathing themselves, cleaning their clothes, cleaning their things to show separation to God. Right? Israel's sanctifying themselves, cleaning themselves, set them apart to God and God's purpose. And ultimately here, of course, God's purpose, particularly in this case is the promised land, was to bring glory to himself. So he tells the Israelites, sanctify themselves. It's again, allowing God to be able to show glory and then shower his grace on his people. Right? So that's the instructions that are given before they're taking across the Jordan River here, verses 5 and 6. Sanctify yourself. Tells the Levites, get the ark ready. Okay. What's important? What's the importance here for Israel to know that they existed for God's glory? Why is that important for the Israelites to come to an understanding that they exist for God's glory? Why is that really important? That their existence was for God's glory. What? I can't hear.
He will do wonders among thee.
Okay, do wonders among them. Correct. What else?
Motivation to be different than the folks around them who think different.
All right, let's try to bring this full circle. Why is it important to know who your boss is and what he wants? Why is that important?
So it's pleasing unto them.
Right. So you can do what you're supposed to do, right? If I know who my boss is, know what my job duties are, then I can do what I'm supposed to do, and then everybody's happy, right? The Israelites, it's important for them to understand that their existence is for God's glory so that they can seek to know God's purpose, right? And then do what he wants them to do, walk in his ways. So if you know the chain of command, then you can be more effective at falling in line on that chain of command. Ultimately here, this whole thing is for God to glorify himself, right? Because that's what we want. That's what the Israelites want. That's what we as Christians want. We want God to be glorified and known more and more every day in our lives and everything that's going on so that we can then seek to know God and follow in what he wants us to do. It's important for them to know their existence and why they're here. What are some, what would be some consequences if Israel believed that God existed for their purpose, not them existing for God's purpose? What's the consequences of Israel thinking God existed for them, not them existing for God?
They would start making demands themselves.
Exactly, right? They begin to see God as somebody that they can manipulate, right? If they're there for this, for us, they can then find ways to manipulate him. Then they would not then seek out to truly know God and his ways. And of course, at the end of that thing, God would have taken the woodshed and where hind ends out, right? That's what would have happened. That's what does happen for their selfish existence. So Israel was to set themselves apart for the miracle-working God, and soon they were going to witness the power on their behalf for his glory as they set out after God. So sanctify yourself, hire the priest, get the ark, pick it up, take it and pass over before the people. Okay? Why do you think Joshua tells the priest here to take the ark in front of the people and parade it in front of them? Why do you think that he's doing that? It's a small, important thing. Why did he tell the priest to pick the ark up and pass over before the people? And then they went and took up the ark and went before the people. Why do you think that they did that? Hey, here we go, right? Let everybody see it happening, okay? Pick the thing up. Make sure everybody sees you pick the thing up. Sorry, probably kind of irreverent calling it the thing, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Get it. So I'm trying to put us in the mindset of these Israelites, right? That's the thing that's important. That's the thing that's, all right, here we go, right? They're picking it up, they're moving it, they're taking it to the beginning of the multitude of these people so they can know that things are getting ready to take place. Now, last thing here, verses 7 through 17 is the demonstration demonstrations at the crossings. All right? Now, besides his glory, God had two other goals in mind here as he's going to lead the Israelites to the Jordan River and into the Promised Land. First, magnify Joshua in the sight of all of Israel so they would know that God was with Joshua. Okay, and that's an important part of this, just like he was with Moses. The tribes have already here begun to recognize the importance of God's presence with Joshua, because they prayed God's presence be with Joshua after he confronted them about settling in the eastern of the Jordan River, right? And not joining in the conquest, over in chapter 1. So God's going to make it certain here that they knew that their prayers were answered. You go to verse 7. And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day I will begin to magnify thee in the sight of all of Israel, that they may know that I was with Moses. I'm going to be with you, so I will be with thee. Okay? First thing here of the demonstrations is that, right? He wants to magnify Joshua the same way that he did with Moses. God goes on here then to give more instructions on the Jordan crossing. All right, verse 8. And thou shalt command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When ye are come to the brink of the water of the Jordan, ye shall stand still in Jordan. All right, so instruct next, Joshua, I'm going to magnify you amongst all these people, just like I did Moses, so they know you're my man. Now, tell the priest, take the ark, go stand in the Jordan River. All right, next thing he does there in verse 8. The priest carrying the ark, right, comes to the Jordan River to stand in it. Now, at this point, is God offered a solution for crossing the river? Nope. He hasn't. Hasn't told Joshua anything. Hadn't told the priest anything. Just told him, hey boys, put the waders on. We're going to the river, right? So go to the Jordan River, to the side of the Jordan River, take the ark, stand in it. It's all the instructions that he gives them. Verse 9, Joshua then said unto the children of Israel, Come hither and hear the words of the Lord your God. So Joshua calls the people to listen to God's plan after the priests are standing in the river. Right? Let's make sure we kind of understand and visualize what's going on here. Got the priest standing in the river holding the ark. Everybody's probably kind of looking around like, all right, what we do now? What's going to happen? Josh says, all right, y'all, listen up. This is what's going to happen. And we get to verse number 10, in which God then finally reveals in verse 10 here how the people are going to cross the river. But before Joshua goes on to give these details, he relays God's message that the Jordan crossing is going to accomplish the second goal, that the people would know that the living God was with them and that he would, without fail, drive out the inhabitants of the promised land. Verse 10. Verse 9 tells them, listen up. Verse 10, And Joshua said, Hereby ye shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the heathenites. Right? Got the list of them there. So, telling the people of Israel, it's going to be very obvious, as the priests are standing in the river, very obvious that the one true living God is going to direct, and he will not fail in you taking over the promised land. Okay? Verse 11, Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth passeth over you, before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take you 12 men out of the tribes of Israel, out of every tribe of man. It shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand upon a heap. And it shall come to pass, and it came to pass, when the people removed from their tents to pass over the Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the ark of the people, and as they bear the ark were coming to the Jordan, their feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, For the Jordan overfloweth of all his banks at the time of the harvest, that the waters which became down from above stood and rose up upon a heap, very far from the city, Adam that is beside, Zaratan, and those that came down towards the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed right over against Jericho. And the priest that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over. Okay? Now, what would the reference to God here in verse 10 specifically as the living God, why is that an important reference to the people of Israel? What were they about to invade? The promised land. Why is it important that the reference to God being the one true living God is kind of hammered home a couple times here as they are getting prepared to invade the promised land? Why is that an important thing for them to be reminded of?
The gods of the Canaanites were dead.
Thank you, right? So we've got a bunch of false gods there in heathenite land, a bunch of them. We'll kind of get to some of them. So it's enticing, right? There's a reason those people are following after these gods. It ain't like it's no fun, right? It's enticing, okay? So it's a reminder to them that they're one true God. So when they see these false gods, they will understand that they couldn't part the Jordan River like God's going to part the Jordan River, okay? So God's plan unfolded just as He said that it would. This is kind of cool. I want to spend just a few minutes before I'm done talking about this. Okay? So the priest stepped into the Jordan River. And as soon as the priest stepped into the Jordan River, which was at flood stage, okay, and we know, when you think about this little creek in the river in here, when it gets to flood stage, what it does, right? It's up, it's huge, it's fast, and all this stuff. And the old priest dipped the old toe in, and it was like a dam just kind of formed from the northern side of the river. All right, and it says that the water piled up was the phrasing that it was used. I don't remember what verse exactly that it was in, but it says that the water piled up, right? Now, as I was going through this, I was thinking about snow clouds, right? I mean, this time of year, they push the snow off. We know on the side of the road what happens to that snow. It just keeps, as long as it doesn't melt, keeps getting higher and higher and higher in these piles. So that's what this water was doing. Now, how long do you think that it took for all these Israelites to walk across the banks of the Jordan River, the riverbed of this Jordan River? Did it happen in 3 minutes? No. It took some time. And what was the water doing the whole time they were walking across? From the way it reads, it was doing what? Piling up more and more and more and more and more. Right? So we've got all of this water that's still rushing from the north, right? If you went 2 miles to the northern side of this, the water would still be going. And somebody's probably up there fishing and looked down, and the water was just piling up higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. To the point you couldn't see anything. And all the Israelites walked across the Jordan River. And just like you did at the Red Sea, it wasn't a bit muddy, right? Of course, it was dry. Easy to walk across. The water just keeps piling up higher and higher and higher. Every one of these Israelites eventually made it across. Back to verse 16. And the water which came down from above stood, rose up upon a heap, very far from the city Adam, that is beside Zaratan. And those that came down, so the water was going the other way, right, towards the sea of the plain, even to the salt sea, it failed. We know how a river works. Water runs, gravity, because of a little bit of a pitch of the land, it's dig out an area, and it moves down to the watershed, moves down to a bigger area, right? Then it sticks down to the sea. But if the water's not running, what's going to happen on this end down here? Everything's going to dry up, right? You're not going to have anything down there. So it's just piling up higher and higher and higher and higher, right? That's the way this reads. Okay, for the entirety of them walking across. And they made it over clean, verse 17 says, dry ground, unto all the people were passed clean over the Jordan River. Let's just look down at chapter 4 real quick, verse 1. It came to pass when all the people were clean passed over, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, take you out 12 men of the people of every tribe, and command them. And this goes on to setting up here a memorial of God. Now, we're going to get to this in a second, but they're going to go out and set this memorial up. What's the water doing? All right, so when they get done doing the memorial, all right, they're gone, and this is obviously taking some time. Okay? I really, from everything I have read, I really don't think the water ever stopped running on the northern side of this. I don't see anything about it. I don't think God stopped it. It just kept getting... What happens now when they're done with the memorial?
Water flows.
Does God just, we don't, we'll get to it eventually, but there's not a, that's a lot of water that's just going to come flying back down to the southern end of this, okay? And we'll kind of get into this. I think I remember hearing this story in Sunday school, right, in junior church growing up. I never really considered that water just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what that would have looked like for like 6-year-old, whatever, little Jedediah walking across and seeing, whatever the case may have been, what it would have looked like. So it's kind of crazy to think about. And the amount of water that would have had to rush back in, but we know the memorial is what? What do we know about the memorial that was set up? To this day, still there. So that rushing water it's wild. And we'll get more into that next week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this lesson here in the display of power over nature that you had once again for the Israelites as you held the Jordan River up as they went across, so they could all for your glory, your majesty. I pray as we continue to move through this, Lord, as well as we continue to see these things and look at the Israelites' response to these things and how they should have reacted and did react and didn't react, and things that happened because of it, Lord, and Rahab, and just a whole clan of people that we'll get to interview here and look at as we move through this chapter, this book of Joshua, Lord, that you would allow us, Lord, to see our own lessons and truths and insufficiencies that we have in our lives, Lord. So we can fix us. Pray for Pastor Rob here as he comes the next little bit as well. Just keep us attentive to the word you have for us through him today, too. And you pray. Amen.